Greetings, Edward the MetaTutor here. Today we're talking about conditionals in Python. I've highlighted the keywords if, elif, and else because those are the three primary conditional statements or keywords that you'll use in Python to control the flow of your program. So without further ado, let's introduce these. Let's create a variable equal to 10, a equals 10, actually, let me do some editing. No, wait, one more time. And we have code. So, in this piece of code, I create a variable a, set it equal to 10, and then I have a tripartite, meaning three-part conditional statement. So I have first my if. Notice how they're all the same color. That's because they are Python keywords. So I have if, elif, and else. Elif is a portmanteau of the words else and if. So essentially what we're saying is, normally I say, if, condition is met, then do this thing. In all other cases, do this other thing, right? It's either one of these things, either that one or this one is going to get, is going to run. But for cases where that, we need a little bit more nuance, elif does the job. For every if statement, you're also going to, for everything that contains an if, so if or elif, you need to have a condition. If it's just else, you're saying literally everything that has not been covered above, and so you don't need to say, a is equal to 0 or whatever. A is less than 0. And so what this does is this code checks to see if the number that I've created is positive, 0, or negative. And elif makes sense here because it is, 0 is neither positive or negative. It's just 0. So if I run this code, let's see what happens. Value is positive. If I change it to 0, then we should have value is 0. And then lastly, if I change it to a negative number, let's say negative 10, whoops, value is negative. Okay, great. So really straightforward. Essentially the way that this works is we have our keyword, we have our condition, the thing that if this is true, then we run this code below, and then our colon. And basically anything that's indented in here is going to run if this thing is true. There we are. So obviously your use of these are, of these keywords is going to depend on what it is that you want to do. What I want to show you though is the basic structure. I want to point out a few things here. The first of which is for something like this, only a conditional statement, a three-part conditional statement like this, only one of these will work, will print. However many if statements equals how many how many of these can be true, maximally, right? Basically, the way the else statement works and the way that elif works, if I turn that back to an elif, the way that these work is L looks up above to see if there's an if statement above. So if I get rid of that if statement, this else down here looks for the nearest if statement that's at the same indent level. So right now, if I pass a number like 10, then I'm going to get value as positive because a is greater than 0. And then I'm also going to get print value as negative because a is not equal to 0, right? It's 10. So then it's going to run this else statement. Because that else statement isn't smart enough to say, oh, well, obviously 10 is not negative. All the else statement is thinking is, hey, well, this thing right here is false, so I have to run. So now we basically have a block right here, a conditional block right there, and then we also have a separate block right here. But if I change that if to an L, and now it's if, elif, else, all of this is one block. And I can also make it longer. I can say, elif a is greater than negative 10, print, value is negative, but greater than negative 10. Geez, that's a long line. And so, what we have right here is we know that, we know that 10 is greater than negative 10, but 10 already triggered up here because 10 is greater than 0. So basically it's the first thing going down this list that's true that is going to print. So, you could make it impossible to print something. Like, for instance, a is greater than 20. This right here, I could change this text. I'll change it to, this will never print. And the idea here is that if a is greater than 0, or if a is greater than 20, it's also greater than 0. And if it's greater than 20 and it's greater than 0, then it's just going to print value as positive, which means it's never going to get to this elif statement, ever. It will never get there. So, I recommend that you play around with this a little bit if this is something that, you're new to, and, just try around with a bunch of different things. But I just want to show you, a few of the basics. Basically, if you create a bunch of, you can continue to create just a bunch of elif statements, just like the one that we had down below, print greater than -10. You can create a bunch of elif statements, and you can make it so that, a bunch of different things might possibly run. But there's normally a more elegant solution to a problem than that. Hopefully you don't ever have to type a whole bunch of elif statements. Okay, so the last thing that I want to look at here is something called a nested if statement. And so I'll talk about this in a second. But I'm going to change my if condition to something, maybe I'll just use a string here, and I'll say instead a is equal to hello, or a is equal to yes, right? So if a is equal to yes, then we'll create a nested if statement now. We'll print, yay. But then maybe we want to check something else. Let's say that we have another variable, right? So let's say b is equal to no. We can then have inside this like conditional statement, right, indented, right? If we go back, now we're saying, if we type elif right here or else right here, or if we create a new if statement, both of these run, right? But if we indent it in, then now this if statement right here will only work if this first one is true. So we can, that's what it means by nested. It's an if within an if. So if b is also equal to yes, then we'll print super yay. And, if b is not equal to yes, so else. If b is not equal to yes, then we're just going to print meh, something like that. And so as it goes, since a is equal to yes and b is equal to no, we're going to get yay and meh. We at least triggered that first thing because a is equal to yes, and then it looks here and it says, well, we're already inside the first if statement, but b is not equal to yes, b is equal to no, so we're going to print this other else statement. And so this is another thing, I said earlier, the else statement looks for the nearest if statement above it at the same indent. If I were to put this else back one indent level, now it's not going to run the meh anymore. It's just going to run the yay. Because a is equal to yes, that's true, print yay, and then if b is equal to yes, print super yay. B is equal to no, though, so, well, it doesn't tell us what to do, right? It's empty space down here that I have. So it doesn't do anything. This else statement now belongs here. So if I want meh to run, then I have to change a's value to no. Now just meh is going to run. Is a equal to yes? No. Well, we're going to run this instead. So again, just in conclusion, I'd like to point out that what you do with these conditionals, right, which is what they're called, conditional statements, right? On this condition, do this thing. Otherwise, do this thing. What you do with this is up to you. And there's a lot of different uses here. Obviously, there's a lot of complexity here, right? If you have a lot of variables that you're keeping track of, you can create a lot of different outputs by having nested if statements, by having, a bunch of different elif statements. There's a whole lot of different things you can do, and that allows you to control the flow of most programs. So if anything, I simply recommend that you create some variables and create some if statements and try some if blocks, some conditional blocks of if, elif, and else, and just try to guess what's going to print. Try to see if you can figure out, what is going to run as a result of this code. Maybe look up other tutorials and see if you can, read somebody else's code and see if you can figure out what will print based on the conditions. But that's it for today. The only thing I want to end on is the idea that any Boolean expression can go right here. So anything that evaluates to either true or false. And that's why we're using double equal signs, because that evaluates to true or false. Same thing with and, that's Java. Same thing with and, same thing with or. Anytime that you compare something, you get it. It's a Boolean expression. You're going to get true or false back. That is what goes in an if statement. Be careful, make sure that you're doing things properly, but if you follow that syntax, then it should work for you and you should be able to explore. So best of luck, have fun experimenting, and hope to see you again.